Hi, my name is Jim Parker. This is my business partner, Carey Sobel. We're with Boss Group International. We are in the business of helping people sell their businesses.
Today's episode of Boss Talk is called Game Plan, Assembling Your Business Sale Team. When you go through the process of selling your business, it's not just yourself. It's not just yourself and your business broker. It's a whole team of people. Some people that are already on your team. And we're going to talk about all the different members of the team as we go through this.
And it's not complicated. It's not overblown.
It's not.
But you know, people need to know who's going to be involved in trying to get that transaction across the table.
Now, as
across the line,
a business broker podcast, the most important member of your team is your business broker.
Well, you know, it's not just because we're a business brokerage podcast, but it truly is.
We're the nucleus. We're the conduit to everybody else on your team. We're the quarterback.
We're the quarterback. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the business broker is the most important person because they're the person that's driving the process for the business owner and for the buyer. Mm-hmm. And then the most, you know, it's the most important. Getting a good quality business broker is important. Let's talk about a little bit about what a business broker does. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but
definitely not. But I will say,
because we cover that enough. But
I'll say one thing: a lot of people don't know that the profession of business broker exists.
Right.
And it's fascinating to me. I mean, I didn't before I started practicing it. When I sold one of my first businesses, is what got me into the space because I go, wait, there's a person that does that, that actually facilitates the deal. So a lot of business owners think that they can go sell their business themselves, and the fact of the matter is they can.
Yeah,
however,
absolutely.
If you're going to go get a new home built, are you going to go build your house yourself? Are you the best candidate to go build your own house?
Right.
So when you're selling a business, I think it's important that you consider working with somebody that has done it before, that understands the processes, that's experienced, and that can help you get to the finish line.
And you know what? For the people that sit there and watch our shows over and over again, and watch my personal shows over and over again, they're probably so sick of me hearing saying this, but I cannot say it enough. And that is the national average is that 80 to 90% of the businesses for sale do not sell. 50% of the deals fall apart at the closing table, you know, and a lot of those deals are being being done by business brokers themselves. Mm-hmm. So, you know,
the stats go down.
So you're trying to do it yourself. It's taking it down even less, and I think the business owner might be trying to do it because they're thinking I can save the fees that are involved with the business anymore, which you would, but. You'll
spend more money.
You're going to spend more money. You're going to spend a tremendous amount of time, which is going to take away, because that's what we do. I mean, we're spending a lot of time getting deals done. And by the way, before we go any further, we sell about 80 to 90% of the deals. I sell about 90% of the deals that I take to the market. So, you know, we're giving those statistics. That's the national average. But, you know, if you're going to try to sell the business yourself, it's going to take a lot of time.
Where the business owner should be focused on running their business.
And keeping the numbers up.
Yeah.
Because if they're distracted in trying to sell their business, their numbers are going to start to go down, which is like the worst thing you want to have happen when you're taking to the market. And will you, at the end of the day, actually maximize what the actual selling price would be? And it's not just going to the market at a really high price that achieves that. There's strategies to that. There's things that we know work and do not work. And so, you know, as a business owner, you don't know that, you know, and you know, it's not something I'd be willing to share it. We've shared some of those things, but that's probably an episode of its own. But and then all the interest, all the little things that it takes to make a business sale happen. There's so much to know,
and there's so many people involved. So you know, when we're talking about the team, I mentioned, you know, some of the team members on your roster already exist in your sphere.
Right.
So your CPA as a business owner, the CPA that you're currently working with, is a critical part in getting a deal across the finish line.
Right.
That CPA that you're working with absolutely has the quickest access to all of your financials, your historical tax returns, profit and loss statements. Maybe they're doing the bookkeeping for you and they can help you out. So we always encourage a business owner to talk to their CPA to let them know that they're considering the sale of their business. Of course.
And not only do they have access to the information, but they probably are more knowledgeable in certain areas with the numbers themselves a lot of times than the business owner themselves.
I always encourage a business owner, I say, connect me with your CPA. After you tell them that you're considering the sale, of course, and telling them that it's a confidential process, connect me with them because I'm going to ask questions that you may know, but you may not know, and your CPA probably does.
Right.
So just the facilitation of information back and forth, letting that CPA or accountant just know that it's going to be something that's going to happen in the next couple of months, prepare them for it so they're not blindsided. Maybe it's coming up to tax season. A lot of right now is tax season, right? It's hard right now to get a CPA or an accountant on the phone and ask questions about it. But if you had provided them the information that you're going to be selling or considering the sale prior, they can plan for it ahead of time and be prepared to have conversations with a buyer's CPA or answering questions for us as brokers when we're going out there and answering questions about the financials.
And with that, we are very conscious of the CPA's time, because CPA may or may not charge the seller that cost, but also the CPAs are very, very busy. So it's not like we're going to absorb a lot of their time, but things can happen a lot more efficiently when we have that open communication with the CPA.
And I think
we keep those conversations as short as we possibly can, respecting the CPA's time.
There's a little bit front-loaded questions, and then you probably go silent for a while. But the time where the CPA is probably the most involved is during due diligence, right? So when a buyer comes in and they are doing the financial due diligence aspect of a transaction, they're going to have a ton of questions about the numbers. This is where a CPA can alleviate the business owner from having to answer all those questions, including ones that they don't know. And when you go through due diligence, having that CPA by your side that may have worked on your company's books for years, decades maybe, they're going to be a big part of that team in helping get it done. I think
and what you said earlier too, having the buyer's CPA sometimes just have a quick 5-minute conversation with the seller's CPA can fix things really quickly or questions really quickly. Something
that I see often is when a seller comes to the table and they go, well, I need to get this amount at closing because I'm going to have capital gains tax and taxes, and even though I'm selling my business for $4 million, what am I actually going to walk with? A CPA is a critical component in helping a seller understand what their tax repercussions are post-sale.
Right.
And we always encourage a business owner to have that conversation with their CPA as early as possible so it actually can help them realize that maybe they need less than what they thought for their number that they want to walk away, or maybe they need more and it's not the right time.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it's not how much that you're going to get as far as from a sales price, but how much you're going to be able to keep in your pocket at the end of the day with taxes. And I'll go one step further, and we've had these conversations. Is that your CPA should be talking to you about what your tax consequences are going to be on that sale, but there are CPAs out there that are really well known in our industry that specialize in dealing with taxes when it comes to sale of businesses. And what would be a great idea is that CPA, we can introduce the business owners to those kind of CPAs, but we're not trying to cut your CPA out. Actually, we and the CPAs we would introduce would rather work with the seller's CPA. And said, because it's easy to just look up on a tax code and say, okay, this is how much you're going to be paying, blah, 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 blah. But there are laws out there, specific laws, if you incorporated a certain time period, or if you did this or you did that, where you could save on taxes, where a typical CPA that's not dealing with tax issues when it comes to the sale of the business would have no idea about. So putting your CPA in contact with a CPA that we know that specializes in taxes when it comes to selling a business could save a lot of taxes as well.
No doubt. I think there's two main questions two questions that a business owner says eyeing an exit. They say, one, how do I save on taxes? And then two, what do I do with this money after I get it to properly invest it? So we definitely have those contacts.
And with the CPA too, like sometimes how the deal is structured could have a tax consequence.
You're talking about asset allocation, you're talking about stock sale versus asset sale. There's so many things to consider. So, making sure that your CPA is in line with the fact that you want to sell, and hopefully humble enough to say, yeah, I think somebody else might need to give you the advice on this particular component of it. It's just getting that team working together. While we're on the CPA topic, I do want to say, though, I don't think it's in a business owner's best interest to have their CPA provide a valuation on the business.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for laughing, but it's true. Like CPAs, look, I can't do what they do. They're extremely knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. That they're there to do taxes. They really know what they're doing. But the reason I laughed, and maybe I shouldn't have, is just so many times I've heard a business owner say, "I already know what my businst is worth."
When you laughed, I knew that's what you were thinking.
And I'm like, okay, how do you know? And they're like, oh, my CPA told me. And I've heard that so many times in my career, and I think maybe 2 or 3 times, if that, the CPA was even in the realm of reasonability of what the business is worth.
Yep.
And I recently experienced that just last week, that I gave a broker's opinion of value. They actually didn't come to me the first, but I gave them the broker's opinion of value, then went to their CPA, and their CPA came back, and their CPA said, well, my EBITDA number is this. I came up with this. Jim only came up with that. The multiplier should be this, so you should be selling for a lot more. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, well, you forgot to make a negative add back for the rent, because he owns the property. Mm-hmm. He's not paying himself rent. The fair market value of the rent is $48,000 a year. You got to deduct that. I'm not trying to penalize the seller. That's something that a buyer is going to notice up front, or if they don't, they're going to figure it out in due diligence. At some point, it's going to be pointed out. And at the end of the day, we're trying to make good transactions happen. We're not trying to get anything over anybody. But, that was an example of that. That was why his number was so much higher, because he didn't do a negative add back. And then he was using a multiplier for a number that would have been if the business was a lot bigger. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's just, I hear it all the time. I already know what it's worth. My CPA told me this. Your CPA does not sell businesses. This is what we do day in and day out. We have access to a ton of information of businesses like theirs, same industry, around the same gross sales, what they've sold for. We know what the marketplace is. We are talking to SBA lenders, because a lot of the businesses that we sell are being bought through a loan through an SBA situation. And the lenders have to be on board with that number too. You know what I mean? A buyer is not going to come across, even if they have $3 million in cash, they're not usually going to buy a business for $2 million in cash. They're going to leverage it.
But you're painting a great picture here, because the CPA puts that perspective out. A business owner may have their own perspective. A financial institution or SBA may have their own perspective. We got to put all of those things together in a team effort to decide what is the most probable selling price. Now, I'm always going to lean on us, because we have market data and insights and historical values and comps. But, it's getting all of those different perspectives to see things that we might be missing, that the CPA may know.
Yeah, hey, I'm open.
They ran the business.
Exactly. I might be open for that. I mean, the CPA may have seen an ad back that I didn't see, just because they're more familiar with the seller's financials. That's great. I have no problem with the CPA being involved with, talking about the financials and, all that stuff. But
it's not the end all be all.
At the end of the day, the CPA is not the person to do a valuation on the business. I think you got to use a business broker. A business broker, do a broker's opinion of value, determine what the most probable selling price of the business is. If you're a business owner and you want to hire a business appraiser, either yourself hire that person, or we know great business appraisers. You can get an actual business appraisal done on the business for a couple $1,000s. Mm-hmm. Our broker's opinion of values, we don't charge for that. There's no obligation to use our services. But if a business owner does feel more comfortable using an appraiser to actually get an appraisal done, great, do it. But
we welcome
CPA
that.
is not. It's either a broker that's seasoned and experienced that should be coming up with a broker's opinion of value, or actually get an appraisal done by a certified appraiser that does this all the time.
So, in talking about the team, we've talked about the broker, we've talked about the business owner's CPA or accountant. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the attorney.
Okay.
I would say most business owners probably have an attorney, whether they needed one in the past or they just have one for preventative measures. You always, as a business owner, should have an attorney in your court protecting your best interest, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of different attorneys that could be involved in a transaction depending on how big it is or how complicated the sale may be. But I always encourage a business owner to have their own legal counsel reviewing everything that they do.
Right.
something that we've discussed, you and I don't remember if it was in a podcast or not, but when a business owner is getting ready to sell their business, I would say, I'm going to guess 60 to 70% of the time, I think that our listing agreement is reviewed by a seller's counsel.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that number?
Yeah, I never really kept track, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's over half the time. I've actually just recently had a business attorney review it, a commercial real estate agent attorney review one.
And I think it's now to the point where you and I are almost at the point where we want business owners to take the listing agreement, and not only the listing agreement, but the typical asset purchase agreement that we do on the front end of a transaction, give it to the attorney and say, hey, this is the standard form we typically use prior to going under contract. Is there anything that you have a problem with in here? Do we have to have further conversations? Attorneys can really crush a deal if they're not on board.
And we need to know that up front.
Up front.
And I think we're going to be getting to, too, is that you don't, if you're selling your business, you may have had a business attorney that you've worked with for many years that you know and trust and like, but you really need a attorney that specializes in mergers and acquisitions or business transactions, things like that. The sale of businesses at the end of the day, not just a regular business attorney. You hire a regular business attorney. We say this all the time when we're on these podcasts. You hire a regular business attorney. They don't know what the realm of reasonability usually is. Their job is to protect you as much as they possibly can. That's their job. But there is that realm of reasonability that they have to work within, because the seller needs to be protected and the buyer needs to be protected. They both need to be protected. And negotiations between the attorneys should be in that realm of reasonability. So that's one reason. But the other reason, too, is that, an attorney that deals with M&A work and business sales all the time are going to be thinking about things that a regular business attorney may never even thought of.
That's right.
And so you might be losing some protection because you're going to a regular business attorney. Whereas an M&A attorney would be like, we have to think about this and we have to think about that. This is what they do day in and out. This attorney, these kind of attorneys. They have the experience. They've seen this stuff. They've seen that stuff that's come back and has haunted previous sellers. That's the experience that's brought to the table. So not that I have anything wrong with a business attorney. It's just a regular business attorney is probably not the best person to be, negotiating or working on a purchase contract. And actually, I was telling you about the attorney that recently got involved looking at my listing agreement. He seems like a really nice guy. He seems like he's a very accomplished attorney, and he was reviewing my listing agreement that I'm about to list with the seller, and he was wanting to include things. Now the seller owns the business and the property. He was putting in the listing agreement that he wanted me to advertise at the highest rate possible for LoopNet, to advertise the property on LoopNet. And I'm like, I can't do that. And the attorney didn't understand. I'm like, and he just doesn't understand. There's nothing wrong. He's not doing anything wrong, but he's a commercial real estate agent. He knows that when you're selling commercial property, LoopNet probably drives more traffic than anywhere else to come up with people looking for property. And he wanted to put in the listing agreement that I spend the highest amount possible on LoopNet advertising that real estate. Well, the problem is we're not just selling the real estate, we're selling the business. And LoopNet is a public platform. So if we put that property on LoopNet, everybody would know that property was for sale, and potentially the business is for sale. We're not trying to find a real estate investor to buy a piece of property. We're trying to find somebody that wants to own a business and have the property. So it's two different things, and so I think he understood at the end of the day, we can't do that. You don't want to do that. We want to protect the confidentiality of the seller. And we're not looking for a real estate investor. We're looking for somebody that wants to own a business and the real estate.
It's a great point of just showing why, the members of a business owner's team may have to get extended through this process. If the attorney or accountant that are on their team now are not the best professionals to help facilitate an M&A transaction.
Right.
And hopefully those professionals remain professional and, like I said, can be a little bit humble enough to say, yeah, let's bring somebody else in to help out with this.
Well, you were talking about us earlier. You gave us examples of the business brokers were like the quarterback.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're fielding a team. Do you want to field the Kansas City Chiefs? Or do you want to field the Chicago Bears? No offense to anybody from Chicago. But, who you want to field. And you want to put together the best possible team that you possibly can that's going to make you as successful as possible.
Yep.
So.
And one more point on attorneys. In closings, there are times where there are buyer's attorney and seller's attorney, and they get a deal done themselves between the buyer and the seller's attorney. Maybe it's on the buyer's paper or the seller's paper. But there's a lot of times where we have third-party closing attorneys that are a part of the process. And a third-party closing attorney does not represent the buyer. A third-party closing attorney does not represent the seller. They represent the transaction. It's their job to put together a set of unbiased third-party closing documents
based on the LOI or the asset purchase agreement
to drive it to closing.
Yes.
So, in those cases, buyer's attorney looks over the docs from the buyer's best interest, seller's attorney looks over the docs from the seller's best interest, and there is another third-party attorney that is facilitating the closing.
Yes.
That's probably typical in a Main Street business transaction.
smaller transaction deal. That is very typical. And then that attorney is also, the closing attorney in that situation is also checking to see if there's any liens and liens or judgments against the business.
Outstanding tax
filing
liabilities
things with the state and federal government that need to be filed. So they're doing that kind of stuff as well. So they play a very critical point.
And in most cases, I would say that the closing attorney, when there's a third party, is probably holding the escrow as well. If there's an escrow deposit. So we've talked about business broker, we've talked about CPA accountant, we've talked about different attorneys. Let's talk about lenders.
Okay.
So most relationships, or I guess I would say most transactions that occur in the space that we practice in have third-party financing. Mm-hmm. So, for a seller, it's not as important, but for a buyer, that buyer probably either has a business banking relationship or they need to be referred to a business banking relationship. They may bank with one of the big institutions that are out there, but they don't offer SBA lending. There are certain institutions that do offer SBA lending. So we're often making introductions to financiers or lenders that can provide a buyer with third-party financing to acquire a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that process, that engagement with the SBA lender happens before we even do that engagement with the SBA lender actually happens before we even give the broker's opinion of value to the business owner up front. It's one of the first steps is we do a broker's opinion of value for the seller. Well, when I'm doing the broker's opinion of value, I come up with the broker's opinion of value, get the most probable selling price. And before I go to the seller and say, hey, this is what your business is most probably going to sell for, I'm reaching out to a lender or two that I work with all the time, and I'm making sure that I'm going to get a lender on board with that sale of the business, that they're looking at it and they're going, yes, we could get that loan done if the right buyer comes to the table, and this is what it would look like. And because there's no reason going out to the marketplace, if your business is going to sell for $500,000 or $5 million, where the SBA buyers are getting SBA loans, there's no reason to go to the market if we can't get a lender on board to lend against that. And so that actually starts up front. And we know, gosh, we've used a lot of lenders over the years, and I'm telling you, there's a big difference between lenders, just like there is between business brokers and other professionals. You've got great ones out there, you've got okay ones out there, you've got good ones out there. We've found some of the best lenders in the marketplace, and those lenders are critical because we got to get the deal to the closing table. And the last thing you want to have happen is, SBA lending. It takes 90 days to get done. From the time we go under contract till we close, you're looking at usually 75, 90 days, more likely 90 days. You don't want to be 2 or 3 weeks away from closing and the deal blow up because the BDO did something wrong. You know what I mean? It's so critical.
I agree with you. And, it's become part of our process, as you said, to get it pre-qualified in the beginning as just one more validation of the broker opinion of value that we put out.
Yes,
so,
correct.
So as business brokers, we provide a broker opinion of value, and that is our opinion of value, but we validate that by going to an institution, a financial institution, and saying, what are you willing to loan on this business based off of the numbers that we put forward? For us, that's the justification, whether our BOV is correct, is incorrect, or needs to be changed, because if a buyer cannot get the financing to buy that business, it probably should not be priced at the rate that we had it at prior.
Yeah, right.
So, a banker or a lender is a critical part of the team, especially for buyers. And the next category I think that I want to discuss is specialized professionals.
Yes.
So this is a long list.
Yeah.
So
and it doesn't apply to everybody in every business deal.
And we'll give a couple examples of that.
Yeah.
So for example, if there is a piece of commercial real estate involved in a transaction, you may want to work with somebody who specializes in commercial real estate. Now, we do, but there are people better than us at it. We can do a pretty damn good job giving an appraised value or some comps on a piece of real estate, but there's often times where it's a bigger piece of real estate, and I contact somebody that I work with, Greg in our office, for example.
Greg DeSalvo is fantastic. I think that's great. We got Greg there at the office, and what's nice is I sell businesses. I feel like that's my expertise, that's my knowledge. I know enough about commercial real estate to be dangerous, but that's not what I do day in, day out. So, I concentrate in doing the broker's opinion of value on the business itself, coming up with the most probable selling price, talking to the seller about, what they can expect throughout the transaction. But then I go to Greg. Greg, he's a commercial real estate guy. He's extremely knowledgeable when it comes to that. And we're going to have Greg on our podcast shortly. And, I have him work on the broker's opinion of value for the commercial real estate. And then, I go to the seller and da-da-da-da-da. Now, the seller doesn't have to deal with two people, just deals with me. But in the background, I got Greg kind of working. And I'm a really firm believer in that. You see some of these agents out there, they sell residential real estate, and they sell businesses, and they sell commercial real estate, and they belong the Amway.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I think you stick to your particular specialty, you get to know it really, really well, and then lean on the others that are really, really good at their specialty.
And Jim, that just shows that the team that we're building, there are team members that exist on the seller's team, but we're adding people to the team based off of what we know is needed to get a deal done. So as Jim mentioned, there's a lot of different specialty professionals that need to be brought into different deals based on applicability. I sell a lot of bars and restaurants, and when I sell bars and restaurants, a lot of times there's a liquor license involved. Liquor licensing has an incredible amount of nuances in it to actually properly transfer, purchase, or utilize a liquor license. And there are liquor license professionals that we work with that help walk a license through the beverage department, get everything properly licensed and in place. There are people that do specific types of loans for liquor licenses, just like there's people that do loans for businesses. So a liquor license professional is another person that should be on your team if there's a license involved. And another thing is,
if you're dealing with Medicare and Medicaid, there's specialists out there that work on getting that kind of information transferred. I mean, you could go through whatever specialty licensing there is for that business. Sometimes we bring in a professional that's what they concentrate on. I mean, we could do it as brokers. The seller could probably do it, but it's a lot of these licensings, there's a lot of things that need to be done. They need to be done in a very specific order. And, it's better just to rely on somebody to pay that little extra money, rely on somebody that way you don't have to sleep. You can sleep at night.
Yep.
It's not being done right.
For businesses that are heavy in equipment, you need an equipment appraiser to come out and put a value on the equipment. If it's a heavy inventory business, sometimes you can have somebody that comes out and does a professional counting of inventory that's validated. So all of the different things as you go from industry to industry and business to business, that business owner, when they put their trust in a business broker, they're putting their trust in us to help bring the people that should be on their team.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not cumbersome for the seller. We're this might, if you're listening to this, you might be like, wow, that seems like a lot. Actually, it's not, because we're gathering all those people together on your behalf to be working behind the scenes to make the stuff work for you. To make your job actually easier at the end of the day.
And like Jim said, we don't want you to be overwhelmed if you're thinking about considering selling your business because of all of these team members that you need, but also
that's why you hire us or people like us,
right? And for your team, I think one of the most important people is a confidant. and this is a person that you trust. This could be your spouse. This could be a key employee. This could be potentially somebody that is just in your life that can help you facilitate a closing for things as simple as opening the door for a buyer-seller meeting, for providing information like a standard operating procedure,
gathering information during due diligence,
anything, but just somebody that you can trust that can be there for you alongside, that can also interact with us as the business broker, that can be your representative if you're not available, because you should be focused on running your business and making money and keeping sales up, so we can quarterback the team to properly help you sell your business.
Yep.
And then, I think financial planner and wealth management, we touched on that a little bit. And I think, one of the missing pieces that we haven't talked about yet is an important team member is buyers themselves, right?
Well, can we stick on the wealth managers and financial planners for a minute real quick? I think that's really important. If you don't have a wealth manager or financial planner and, you're trying to sell your business, what are you going to do? You're going to sell your business. At the end of the day, let's say you get a couple $1 million. What are you going to do with that couple $1 million? Where are you going to park that? Where can you maximize your return on that? That might be part of your retirement for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. You may want to lean on a wealth manager. And you know what? There's also situations like if you're selling your real estate, and people are familiar with 1031 exchange, where you sell your piece of real estate. So if somebody's selling their business and their real estate, they can do a 1031, so they're not paying. They can buy a similar type piece of real estate, not pay taxes on it. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of times when we're selling a business and real estate, the business owner doesn't want to sell both and then turn around and buy a piece of real estate, and do a 1031 exchange, right? Because they're looking to retire and they just don't want to be a landlord anymore. They don't want to have any hang-ups. But there are programs out there that allow them to buy into something that allows them to get the benefits of a 1031 exchange without being the landlord. Mm-hmm. And those are the types of things that we can turn business owners over to wealth managers that can point them in the right direction so they can take advantage of those tax strategies. And
it's not even just always a 1031 or a piece of real estate.
That was just an example.
There's tons of alternative investments, and we work closely with other companies that do that, and we're happy to always refer business owners to them. And then again, buyers themselves, they're a part of the team. In order to get a deal across the finish line, there has to be a buyer that wants to buy the business. And a seller should look at that person as a team member. Once they get past the point, once a seller gets past the point of saying, yep, that's my buyer, you are on the same team with that buyer to get the deal closed.
Yep. You're not against each other.
No.
This mentality that, I can understand, the business owner's trying to negotiate, get the best price they can for the business. The buyer's trying to negotiate and get get a better price or less price. And and that goes with terms and other things that are involved. But at the end of the day, once it's executed, and we're not going to get there unless the buyer and the seller like us each anyway.
That's right.
We're not even getting to that point where we're negotiating unless the buyer and the seller like each other. Usually business owners are, they care about, whoever comes in is going to take care of their employees, going to take care of their customers, they're just going to continue with their legacy of their company. And the buyer, at the end of the day, they've got to like and trust the seller. They're going to do their due diligence, but they also going to take a little bit of a leap of faith. Mm-hmm. And they've got to like and trust the seller. The buyer and the seller got to like each other, or we're not going to get to the point where you're going to start negotiating a contract. But when we start negotiating that contract, we are talking about monies and terms and things like that, and there's a conflict of interest at that point, and there it could cause a little friction. And I think me and you have the personality where we handle that pretty well. Mm-hmm. We negotiate in a way that we're explaining and we're educating and things like that without coming across hostile, and we're very effective in that manner. Once it goes under contract, like you said, you got to look, as a business owner, you got to look at that buyer. They are part of your team. Mm-hmm. That's the only way you're going to get to the closing table. You guys have the same goal in mind, and that is closing on the business.
Absolutely.
And maybe you want to talk a little, Carey, about what we do once we go under contract, about our calls.
Yeah. So on that point of trying to get buyer and seller, working as closely as possible. There's a lot of brokers that don't want the buyer and the seller, that want to keep them apart just to get it to the closing table. It's the wrong mentality. The buyer and the seller build their rapport, and we often encourage weekly calls or bi-weekly calls, depending on how involved the deal is, to have buyer and seller working together towards a closing, meeting up with each other either through a Zoom or in person or on a phone call on an often basis so that they can talk about what's happening in the business this week. Or, Mr. Buyer, how is your loan application process going? Is there information I can provide to you? When we get them rowing in the same direction together, not only are they trying to get the transaction done together, they're building some type of relationship, maybe a friendship. So we encourage buyer and seller to work together.
And we do that in a controlled environment. We don't want to be in a situation where the buyer is just calling the seller 3 times a day and emailing the seller 3 times a day. We are still the the broker. We're handling information flow from both parties. Buyer has questions. They typically email our closing coordinator. So that the seller's not getting 5 emails a day, from a buyer.
Yep.
The seller's trying to run a business. We don't want the buyer calling the seller 5 times a day. So, we control that information in the sense that we set up that formal call. Whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, we jump on the call every Wednesday and we talk at 3 o'clock. And we talk. And, what you said about, the seller says, hey, this is what's going on in my business. I brought on this new client. I, had to... get rid of an employee, blah, 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 and then the buyer gives an update on what's going on in their process. That's all information that the seller already knows typically, and the buyer already knows because we're keeping both parties informed. But there's nothing like both parties hearing it from each other directly as well. Mm-hmm. And this goes a long way that when we do close on the business, there is more of a friendship, like you said. And so usually, the seller's going to be there post-closing to train the buyer on how to operate the business. And it's good for that seller and the buyer to already have a relationship and kind of get to know each other even more through the sales process. So when we do close on the business, they're having a better time with handling the training period. Not to mention that sometimes, there are things that come up, that pop up, and we have problems. And it's easier to work through those problems when the seller truly understands where the buyer's coming from, the buyer truly understands where the seller's coming from, and it's about getting the deal done at the end of the day and making both parties happy and feel good about the engagement they've worked on.
It's a team mentality, and it ties back into the theme today is that assembling your business sale team is an incredibly important part of selling a business. Game plan from the beginning. Explain to your business broker after you choose them who is on your team, who are the professionals you work with. We will do our job in helping you understand who else you need to add to your team and different ways to look as you're moving towards the sale of your business.